Hello, this is Erica Salazar with Women in His Presence, and today I'm going to be bringing you a teaching on Deuteronomy 34. So let's go ahead and look at the first 4 verses. Then Moses climbed Mount Nebo from the plains of Moab to the top of Pisgah, across from Jericho. There the Lord showed him the whole land, from Gilead to Dan, all of Naphtali, the territory of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the Mediterranean Sea, the Negev and the whole region from the valley of Jericho, the city of palms as far as Zor. Then the Lord said to him, "This is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob when I said, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you will not cross over to it." So we're just going to start from the beginning. We notice that Moses climbs to get to this point. That is a high point. He's able to see everything from this location. If he would not have taken the climb, he would not have been able to see the promised land. And if we think about promises, sometimes the Lord is asking us to climb to get to it. And in this situation with Moses, he's not actually going to get to set foot on it, but he is getting to see it. You know, I wonder what Moses felt at that moment. The Lord specifically points out that this is a promise that has happened from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So there's the first 3 generations. I'm sorry, not including Noah, but it's 3 generations. And then there's several generations prior to Moses. I think he's like the 7th one in line. So a lot of times we want promises to happen quickly or soon, and in our minds we think decades, 1 decade, okay, well maybe in another decade. But if we look at this specific promise, it was generation after generation after generation. They were just told of it. No one had actually seen it until Moses. And then Moses actually gets to see it, and I wonder what he thought. There's 2 things that could be happening. He could be upset and mad, because here he's been part of this 40-year journey as part of the promise. And of course, he was just one part. He's not the entire part of the journey to the promise. He could be mad because he's not actually getting to set foot on it, or he could be happy and hopeful that the next generation will. It doesn't say specifically. I'm going to assume that he was happy and hopeful because, finally he can see that what's going to happen in the future for his people is they're going to actually get to live in the promised land. And there's no more of, we've heard of this promise, we've heard of this promise. It's actually walking into the promise and being a part of it. It's really, as a believer and having a relationship with the Lord, promises can be difficult when you're not seeing them in fruition. But Moses was seeing the Lord face to face. So when you're with the Lord face to face, and the more that you're with him, it's a little bit easier to hold on to that faith that the promise will be fulfilled. But again, sometimes it may not be in your generation that the promise is fulfilled. So we cannot put time limits on the Lord as if every promise is meant to be within our lifetime. It could be for your kids. There could be a bigger purpose to why you are being asked to hold on and walk towards a promise. And again, you may not actually be the one to step foot in it. All right, let's go ahead and continue to verses 5 through 9. And Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in Moab as the Lord had said. He buried him in Moab in the valley opposite Beth Peor, but to this day no one knows where his grave is. Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. The Israelites grieved for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days until the time of weeping and mourning was over. When I hear those scriptures, I specifically think about leadership. Here, Moses' time is up as the leader of the Israelites, but it specifically mentions him as the servant of the Lord. So when I think of leadership, if I think about the span of a company, a leader started it. And then eventually it's passed on to another leader. And then it's passed on to another leader. And then it's passed on to another leader. In a business sense, whoever the founder was of that business, eventually they pass away. And it's completely up to the leadership of the next person. When we think about this situation and we think about the Lord as the leader of our life, he is a leader that never leaves. So it doesn't matter when who the torch passes to, if the Lord is at the center of everything, of that leadership, of that foundation, of that company. If we just think about a church, a pastor may be a founding pastor, but then it passes on to another one. If each leader is in direct relationship with the Lord, then the Lord's leadership reigns. And it really is not so important as that specific leader's personality or their leadership skills, because they're heavily relying on the Lord and the leadership skills that he gives. And he is the founder of leadership. He's the wisdom. He's the creator. It is not something that comes from us. And so he always has the best leadership style. The next thing is when he dies, but it specifically says that his eyes were good. His body was not weak. So he still had physically more to give, but his time was up. And as a leader, as you get to a point where it's time for you to step away, sometimes people want to step away when they're like done. There's nothing left to give. And you really want to step away when you're still good. You're not totally depleted. Because if you wait till that point, till you really aren't giving much, there's really not left in you, you're not really leading with strength, you're just kind of, because you can, that's not leaving the company or the situation or the business in a good situation. The next part says the Israelites grieved for 30 days until the time of weeping and mourning was over. I find this very interesting, that there is a limit on weeping and grieving. And I think it's an important lesson, because it's really easy to get carried away with just in grief in general. It's easy to get carried away and let grief be forever. But if we think it's just about leadership, there is going to be grieving of the prior leader who is leaving, and there is a time for that. But if we specifically look in the Bible, there's also a time to, okay, the new is here, let's go ahead and move forward. The next part, we're going to finish it up, 9 and 10. Now Joshua, son of Nun, was filled with the spirit of wisdom, because Moses had laid his hands on him. So the Israelites listened to him and did what the Lord had commanded Moses. So this is probably the most important thing, is that Joshua was filled with wisdom. Why? It says because Moses had laid his hands on him. I'm coming in as a new principal to a school, and one of the greatest things that the outgoing principal did is she left me a lot of wisdom information in a calendar, things that are done, schedules. Having that information allows me to have some knowledge and wisdom of how the school was already going. And if that wasn't there, I would be kind of grasping for straws and having to wait till school started to see, what does this organization look like? So good leaders will bless the incoming leader. And I know when we had a little, I got to meet the staff, in her words to her staff, is, I can't remember exactly what she said, but there is a blessing in that. It's knowing that this is a transition and wishing the new leader well. And I think that's a very important leadership skill. And we see that in the Bible, how Moses had put his hands on Joshua. And so Joshua moved forth with the spirit of wisdom. And so that made it very easy for the Israelites to follow. Since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, who did all those signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his officials and to his whole land. For no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of all of Israel. So we start with Moses. In the middle, we get to the transition a little bit, foreseeing who's going to be the next leader, which is Joshua. And then we end with Moses. And so every leader is unique to the story, to the promise. And here we see why Moses was so unique, why his leadership was different. Doesn't disqualify any leader's leadership before or after, but there is a legacy left with your leadership style. So that's going to go ahead and wrap it up. This is Erica Salazar again, Women in His Presence, and I hope you enjoyed that teaching on leadership in Deuteronomy 34. Please take time to read it for yourself as well and do a little bit of research on some of those geographical locations. I would also do research on customs of grieving. And you're probably going to get a little bit more information and ahas that we didn't get to cover in this teaching. So thank you and have a good day.